There are two types of criterion validity, and one is called predictive, and the other is called concurrent. Predictive criterion validity, basically with predictive, we're trying to predict a future measure. Does an instrument predict the outcomes that you theoretically expect it to? And one example of this could be in the admissions process. Let me go back one. In the admissions process, we are trying to use high school GPA or aptitude test scores to predict a student's college success. And so to do that, we can actually assess the predictive criterion validity of that process. So high school GPA, and let's say an aptitude test score, ACT. We are actually using ACT scores in order to predict college outcomes. And we can test that. Does the ACT test have criterion validity? This is outcomes. Another example could be using some sort of screening test for the selection of employees. Concurrent validity is about items that are happening, that are measuring behavior, that are happening at the same time. For instance, we could measure attitudes towards learning at the same time that we are measuring academic success. Attitudes. My tablet is not working very well today. At the same time as that we are measuring academic success. So essentially, another example could be attitudes towards a course, and then their grade point average, so a student's grade point average in the course, like you see on many course evaluations. So it's the relationship of results from one method or one instrument or one measure as compared to the results of another instrument or measure, like pre-post test scores. Criterion, that's criterion validity. Finally, construct validity is based on how well does a measure measure the concept of interest. For instance, what are all the capabilities that make up critical thinking? We could take a look at identifying an argument, evaluating the argument, and extending the argument. 3 different capabilities that might make up critical thinking, some social concept. So it has to do with logic. And we can use, we can use our measure for internal consistency, which is that Cronbach's alpha, to measure construct validity as well. And so it's related to the indice, it's related to creating an indice, like those the engagement index that we've been talking about previously. So we have a social concept like engagement, and we have several items that might make up this concept of engagement. And we want to know, do those items together validly measure engagement? And we can use that Cronbach's alpha to test whether or not that's the case. Same thing with the critical thinking example. We have a construct called critical thinking. And let's say, for instance, like on the ACT CAP test, they use 3 different things to measure critical thinking: identifying an argument, evaluating that argument, and then extending an argument. And it's those 3 things together that are designed to measure the social construct of critical thinking. So we can actually accurately determine whether or not we have construct validity by looking at these 3 items and determining whether or not we think they measure critical thinking. There are 2 types of construct validity. One is convergent, and the other is divergent. Convergent construct validity is about assessing the correlation among items that make up a scale or an instrument, like on that engagement index, using that Cronbach's alpha. We want the items to converge in their measurement. That gives us convergent validity. On the other hand is discriminant or divergent construct validity, and that's the principle that indicators that we believe measure different things actually do measure different things. So we can actually test that with the Cronbach's alpha or the correlation to find out if they do, so that there's no overlap. And this pseudo Venn diagram shows you that concept. We're trying to measure this overall concept right here. And convergent construct validity would mean, okay, we've got these 2 measures, measures 1 and measure 2, and we want them to converge together. We can test that with the Cronbach's alpha or a correlation, which we'll learn more about. Or let's say we believe these measures don't measure the same thing. We can test that with these 2 statistics. If there's too much overlap, then we don't need both measures to measure the concept. If there's absolutely no overlap, that's discriminant construct validity. Even when we're using established measures, we still need to compute our own reliability and validity measures for our own sample and our own data. These are fairly abstract concepts, and they're only really make sense in context to your research problem. So every research problem, every measurement, you can go through an exercise where you're looking at reliability of your measures and the validity of your measures: face validity, content validity, criterion, and construct. Next, we're going to talk about the accuracy of our design, and that's related to internal validity.